first destination is not Mexico. So, we went to a typical American town to ask why they don't consider Mexico an option to travel to.
Would you consider going to Mexico?
No way.
The idea of going to Mexico is not something that I would foresee.
That's not my cup of tea.
Let me stay here in peace and let those folks stay on their side of the border.
Do you like tequila?
Yes.
Do you like burritos?
Yeah.
Do you like Mexico?
No.
And when your company name is Aeromexico, well, so how do we increase USA flights to Mexico if a big part of Americans just don't like Mexico? According to the Department of Homeland Security, Mexican immigration goes as far as the 1800s settling in on the South, meaning that a big percentage of Mexican ascendants in the USA doesn't even know it yet. So we did a DNA test to prove it and turn those results into discounts. The more Mexican they are, the more discount they get.
Joshua, you are 18% Mexican.
Oh, wow.
So you get 18% off to fly to Mexico. Charlotte, you are 14.4% Mexican. You're 22% Mexican.
That's bullshit. That is bullshit.
You are 18% Mexican.
Well, that's better than you.
So you get 22% off to fly to Mexico.
Oh, come on now. Seriously? Okay. That's for real. So what if I want to take my wife?
Eligible for a 15% discount to go to Mexico. What do you think about that?
I love discounts.
Sorry, Betsy. You're only 3% Mexican.
So we kept giving discounts all over Southern America in our travel agencies. Inner discounts. There are no borders within us.
The street corners down there.
What is Mexican DNA? Let's be real about this. Right. I define culture. It is just popular culture. DNA ancestry has also entered political culture. The right-wing Australian nationalist One Nation recently called DNA ancestry tests as a requirement to prove Aboriginal identity to access benefits. I don't want to give this dangerous idea any more oxygen. And as a geneticist, I can tell you it won't work. Cultural identity is much more than simply what is in our DNA. Aboriginal communities are the ones who determine what is and who is not indigenous. I think this episode highlights a worrying trend of genetic tests to be seen as the ultimate decider of race and identity in public debates. So how does marketing of DNA companies themselves influence our thinking about ancestry? These ancestry companies use this language of science in their marketing and present their results as being highly scientific, which people interpret as meaning actual and factual. This process of estimating ancestry from DNA is scientific, but people may not realize it can also be a bit of a blurry process and actually more of an estimate, of a guess, a estimate, a educated guess. When you look at a slice of a pie chart and it says 16% German, it is not a fact that you're 16% German. It is an estimate. It is an educated guess or you of your ancestry based on statistical inference. I think the representation of our ancestries in pie charts is not helping our conversation. Twins got different results. Recently, 2 identical twins put 5 DNA ancestry companies to the test, and this provides a recently interesting look at how the process works. The raw data for each twin was more than 99% identical, which shows that the way the company produces the raw data is indeed quite accurate. The shocking thing was that the companies provided each twin with noticeably different ancestry estimates. For one, the first twin got 25% Eastern European, and the second got 28. Just to be clear, this shouldn't happen with identical twins because they have the same DNA. Even more surprisingly is one of the twins is 27 to 29% Italian, but the other was 19 to 20% Greek. A lot of this differences would be based on the size of the database that the companies use as references, uh, who is in the database, and who importantly, who has been left out of the database. Who has been left out of the database. These factors would be different between different companies and change through time. So the results you get now could uh, be different to the results you might get in, say, 6 months when the database are updated. Estimating our ancestry is hard, and the main reason it's hard is because our ancestry is more mixed up than some people might have thought. It is not really so clear cut as a pie chart might suggest. The statistics are blurry because our populations are blurry. The bigger picture is that the emerging form of DNA ancestry testing is that we've underestimated the intent of mixing between ancestral groups and throughout human history. Looking at the pie chart, see, they're not taking into historical situations. They're going off of modern populations. Modern. So they're going to a modern Mexican saying, hey, you're the descendant of the Aztec and we're going to take your DNA as that. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going into that person's family tree and seeing what they see first, then saying, okay, we see that you trace back to these people. We see that you only have two Aztec ancestors, and we're going to take that DNA from from you, and say, whatever shows up, then we'll take it at that grain of salt. No, they're taking this like it's cut in stone. So, let's just keep it. Looking at the pie chart must give the impression that the discrete boundaries within you and boundaries with your different ancestries, but as our Mexico so eloquently put it, there are no boundaries within us.
Commerce. House of Representatives, 111th Congress, second session of July 22, 2010. Serial number 111 to 148. Printed for the use of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. energycommerce.house.gov. U.S. Government Printing Office. Washington. 2013, 78 to 125. For sale by the Superintendent of Documents, U.S. Government Printing Office Internet. Bookstore. Let me put up on the board, then, Gal's report. Drive. Evans said that he thought it was entertainment versus medicine. You all are telling us that your sampling is accurate, that you use markers, you assure quality. Then why, on Mr. Cuts, he is the 48-year-old male here? And I believe company number 1 is 23andMe, company number 3 is Pathway. Company number 4 is Navigenics. So if you just take prostate cancer, if you're all accurate and you're all using markers and you take the same kind of saliva as your source, why would we have 3 different results for prostate cancer for Mr. Cuts? Or even if you go to high blood pressure, Navigenics didn't test it, but we got different results. Go to diabetes, with the companies, you got different results if you tested for it. So how do you explain that? Same person, you all say you have quality assurance. You all make sure the markers, and you do all this testing. Why do we have 3 different results with 3 DIF? Farrant companies? Ms. Gould, do you want to start with you? Ms. Gould, sure, thank you. So we did ask for the Gao testimony in advance and didn't receive it. So it would be difficult to respond with specificity to these particular conditions, although we are happy to follow up to do that. And I want to stress that we feel extremely confident in the analytical validity of the tests that we have, and Mr. Stupak. But then why wouldn't you all have the same result? If you're all so analytical, You're all so accurate. You're all so using the markers, Ms. Gould. Right. So, for risk predictions, which is a subset of the things that the companies test for, we use a predictive model. And the predictive model among the companies is different based on the standards within the company, which is why we agree standards are necessary across the company. So we are relatively conservative in the standards that we have. We require for these an initial study that has 700 Mr. Stupak. So you're saving we're all using different stand. Another important issue before us is what sources of information the public has about the meaning of their results. I would argue that the vast majority of test results provided by most DTC genetic companies are simply of entertainment, not medical value. As such, I see little potential for harm and see no problem with the public having full access to such information, as long as it is not oversold in the way I've just been describing. But mixed in with trivial and fun tests that, for example, assay your likelihood of having thick earwax or liking Brussels sprouts, are a few tests offered by such companies that have very serious medical consequences. For example, one major purveyor's panel of DTC tests include, along with trivial matters, a test for specific mutations which result in an exceedingly high risk of breast and ovarian cancer. Thus, having signed up for innocuous information about one's ancestry and possible food preferences, women may also find out via the company's website that they should perhaps consider bilateral mastectomies and removal of their ovaries. Startlingly, the recipients of such ensure that the individual can at least pick up a phone and talk with someone knowledgeable about its implications for them and for their loved ones. I don't leave my patients in the lurch when I discover devastating information about their health, and doing so should not become a new standard of the internet age. Ensuring quality testing is also of paramount importance as we try to realize the potential of genomic information. Simply put, if such information has true medical value, then its quality should be ensured like any other medical test. This is not too much to ask. I applaud the recent move of the FDA to take a risk-calibrated approach to the regulation of such testing. Their action is especially timely given the recent mix-up of 87 samples which occurred from a major purveyor of DTC genomics. In formulating appropriate regulations, it is important to keep in mind that risk calibration is possible. There is no reason that each test must be regulated to the same degree. Rather, the seriousness of the implications of a given test can guide the degree to which it must be regulated. Protecting the public's privacy is critical. A tiny sample of your DNA can serve to differentiate you from every other human who has ever lived. Thus, it seems reasonable that the public should be assured that their samples and their genomic information.
As I said, this was his son, Edward St. Lawrence Gates. Well, cut to 1977. You could say, what's the greatest event in the history of miniseries and TV? Roots. So you could say since 1977, I've had one serious case of Roots envy. You know, I had this little composition book. I could go back to my great-grandmother on my father's side. On my mother's side, great-grandmother. But that was it. There was Alex Haley coming out of the blue, could go all the way to Africa. He could go to the ship that brought his African ancestors over, and then he went all the way back to Gambia. So I was totally jealous of Alex Haley. And so I had a profound and severe case of Roots envy. But I figured, well, I'll never, only Alex Haley could do that, right? So I got to know Quincy Jones in 1999, Anthony Appiah, my dear friend, and I edited the Africana Encyclopedia.
On Turtle Island. Basically, when you deal with indigenous culture, everybody on this planet is a descendant of a tribe. Whether you know it or not, you descend from a tribe. Now, all these tribes have their history. A lot of us have been written out of history. It's called paper genocide. Laws were passed starting in 1700s, 1800s, but the final law that was passed was called the Racial Integrity Act, which was passed in 1924. This act changed people it took your nationality away from you and reduced you to a racial category. So that would be Negro, colored, things of that nature. So a lot of us, when you look back on your the census reports, you're gonna find that a lot of your ancestors were documented as being colored. Now, when you understand that the original term for colored represented anyone who was indigenous and what they would say Native American and black, right? But the point is, black is not a nationality. So when they deal with when they say black, they hide a nationality. Now, a lot of people don't understand, or they don't realize that the actual slave trade started in the Americas and took people to Europe, right? So a lot of what we call slaves or people who came here during the first arrival of slaves to the Americas, a lot of these people were indigenous people who were initially taken from here and brought back, right? My family happened to be one of those. We have our history, we have our records, we have everything. European, in order to, like the first colony established in New Jersey is called Middletown. Middletown sits on the Navesink River. The Navesink, farming and honey. For a long period of time, after they passed laws which denied us the right to carry out our culture, and our culture was simply farming and honey. All this other stuff y'all want to talk about, it's just the show. It's regalia, right? Our culture was hunting and farming. When they outlawed that because they wanted to control our food sources, when they outlawed marijuana and hemp because it provided over 1,000 remedies in terms of foods, medicines, things of that nature. When they outlawed all that, we were forced to start dealing with them on their terms, right? Now, when they removed a lot of us to Oklahoma, the Indians that were removed then were the amalgamated Indians who were a product mainly of the Irish migration and us mixing with the Irish. So a lot of these people, that's why these Indians look the way they look. That's why they look amalgamated. They got the long stringy hair. Because a lot of the ancient European tribes were doing trade with us. Because like I said, the term Moor is not complexion. It eventually meant that, but it meant seafaring nations. So seafaring nations would be any nation who is not landlocked and is on waters, right? So certain nations wouldn't be considered Moors because they landlocked. Their whole culture is not predicated on seafaring, right? So you would include people like Vikings and people like that as Moors, right? This is why they tell you free white people in the definition, they include all different types of people because they're dealing with nations who navigated, who were part of ancient treaties, and I can name the 6 ancient treaties, but we can, we'll do that another time. But there were 6 ancient treaties that united all the tribal families on the planet. All these planets did trade in places like the Isle of Man, which is a small island off of Europe, off of England, pardon me. So we're dealing with ancient indigenous cultures that migrated via navigation of boats and ships. Now, we didn't need giant boats because if you're familiar with the Filipino islands, you can script. And within that hieroglyphic script, they also have the Lord's Prayer. So we're dealing with Christians, right? The early Christians who are not the Christians that we sit up here and fight with. The early Christians were people from the land that we call Kemet. They're called the Coptics. Greek is not a language. Greeks speak Coptic, right? So when we say they spoke Greek, people don't know what they're talking about and they're misleading you. There's no such thing as Greek. These people were Coptics, right? These people were Africans who migrated into a different area. It's packed right now. You can't set up something with all these people here. You got to find a little bit of space for yourself so you can have your own space so you can thrive as a nation. So that's what nations was doing. So we have ancient nations that have ancient treaties, right? Those treaties were interrupted in what you call the Inquisition. The Inquisition started in a place because those treaties were interrupted in what you call the Inquisition. The Inquisition started in a place called Denmark, right? Amongst white tribes. Why? Because those white tribes had treaties with the other tribes all over the planet. And these people are the people that you would eventually become known as Moors, because Moor means navigator. It don't got nothing to do with complexion. The reason why terms like tawny Moor were introduced is because the European associated all Moors with being dark, because the original people that he met navigating.
You ever wondered what actor?
It's the same way they associated Moors with being black, right? But as we taught the amalgamated Moors and people like that how to navigate, now you have something called tawny Moor to differentiate, because that means light